I would want to create an environment for the kid that he has challenges, and we're going to make it difficult, but we're not going to punish him, but we're going to make him do certain things.
Fellas, what's going on? I hope this episode finds you well, and I hope this episode leaves you better than when it found you. Today's episode is with Dr. Barry Davis, and he is the author of a new book called Old the Dog, New Tricks. And I want to get the subtitle correct here because it is, I think, a very powerful book. The subtitle is called The Power of Leading with Emotional Intelligence. And whether you are a father, a husband, a coach, any responsibility that you have as a man requires you to be a leader of some sort. And so I think it's going to be a great conversation for everyone. But we get into some of the softer side of being a coach and a leader and how to navigate, the emotional side of those challenges. And it's a good conversation that spans all of the places. But after almost 4 decades of being a coach, Dr. Barry is coming on to share what he has learned. And so enough about that from me. Let's get into this great episode with Dr. Barry Davis. Dr. Barry, welcome to the Modern Masculinity Podcast. It's an honor and pleasure to have you here.
Oh, hey, I'm excited to be here. It's good. All good.
All of our guests will get into the book, and congrats on that and the release of that, and congrats on, this new career shift and all those things. But I always ask our guests to sort of take us into the muck of their world, the things that they're still challenged with or going through. Because I find that on a podcast a lot of times, we hear about people's accolades and all the great things that they've accomplished, and it almost seems like they've got it all figured out. And perhaps that's the case, but I'd love to know sort of what things you as a man, as a husband, as a leader, the sort of the things that you're still mucking through, if you will.
Well, there's plenty of muck to walk through. I think establishing a routine has always been difficult. Staying in the moment, which, I know what to do. It's just doing it and being able to balance things that are important and staying on task. That's something that I wouldn't say I struggle with, but is challenging. I have a son in Pittsburgh. I have a daughter in LA. I've been married 3 times, so I've had a lot of failure with relationships. It's a two-way street. But I was in there. I think the challenge for me is trying to reconnect with my family because I grew up in Virginia, but I've lived primarily my adult life in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. So those types of things, making sure the people in my life that I recognize that they are important, and I continue to, work hard to connect with them because I'm not getting any younger. I'm 60, so there's just a lot of personal challenges. I've always excelled at whatever I decided I wanted to do. And in this case, I've done that. But the challenges in the muck, that, as you say, is routines and staying on task and relationships with the people in my family.
Yeah, I think it's something that a lot of men, I'm sure, take for granted about being in routine and being sort of around the guys. I grew up in a big part of my life growing up with sports, and then I was in a sales organization, but I was always sort of part of a team. And then I got into, running my own business and being a solopreneur and being an entrepreneur. And there was all that regimen sort of went away. And also the sort of accountability, the camaraderie. And it was sort of upon me to sort of create that for myself. And I find that is a huge challenge because as much as I love the flexibility and I love the being able to work from home, I look at what those other, let's just call them paths, sort of present or provide. And it just makes me, like you said, it makes me a little more intentional about what is the routine that I have to create for myself. What is the structure, that I have to impose on myself, even though it sometimes, like you said, doesn't necessarily come as naturally per se as I would hope, frankly.
Right. And this is the first time in my adult life that I actually do not get up and go to the office to coach a baseball team. This will be the first spring that I have not been either told or, because I'm the coach, it's the first time since 1980 that I will not have to go to the field.
What has that experience been like?
Well, I haven't gotten there yet. I'm trying to look at it as positive, I have freedom to go see some of the things and do some of the things that I was never allowed to do because I was always on the field. I am going to do some broadcasting with ESPN Plus, which will keep me around the game a little bit. But yeah, it's going to be a big difference knowing that February 14th or 5th, whatever the first weekend is, that I won't be on a bus headed to North Carolina or South Carolina. So yeah, it's going to be a big change. So I've prepared myself, I think. So we're going to see. We're going to see. I have plenty to do to keep me busy. So I'll try to stay focused. Like I said, that's one of the things, I need to continue to work on.
A younger me would have been like, "Oh, what does this guy got to like? What does he have to complain about? Like, it's a sort of a non-issue, right? Ah, you're retired. Oh, now you've got all this extra time. Boo hoo, sort of thing." And also, I see my mother recently. She retired a few years ago, and she was in a much less of an identity role. She worked for the city of LA for a few decades, but to that point, she still had to find this new identity. She sort of had to create it. It wasn't something that sort of followed her. And if she wanted to, I could see how, like, if she wanted to still be the person that she was when she was working, how that could sort of eat her up a little bit because it wasn't possible. She didn't have the same community. She wasn't around the same sort of people. And so, has there been an intentional sort of restructuring of that? Have you started to think about, what is your new identity or how you might craft that in this new stage of your life?
I think about it from time to time, but I was always identified as coach. I've been a coach. And I think that'll never leave. You're always a coach. I have former players that are 50 years old calling me coach. You know, I'm 60, they're 50. I coached them when I was young. But I think the identity thing, if I don't find the identity that I'm in now, I wrote the book and I'm doing some speaking and consulting and moving around, trying to stay connected with people in athletics and leadership roles, that type of thing. I'm just going to have to forge my own path and just can continue to work at the things that I want to do. And that's more or less help other people, help programs, help other coaches, help administrators, leaders based on the experience that I've had. So that's the path I'm taking. That's the mindset that I'm taking. So, but it is difficult when you've been the guy, you're the guy that's in charge. And that's a big responsibility. And I loved it. And I loved it. Now I'm kind of on the out trying to work myself back into something where people look at me and say, okay, he also does this. And he's not just a coach, he can do other things. So, yeah, that's a great question.
And one of the sort of motifs or themes that comes up on this show is this ability to, know who we are without our career or family. And I mentioned this a lot, and so our listeners will get their bingo card. I was at an event one time, and the icebreaker was to introduce yourself to the other guys without talking about your work or your family. It was the first time that I had to think about, well, who am I if I'm not a business owner, if I'm not a dad, if I'm not, underneath all of that, who am I? And I think that these moments, these sort of transitions that you're in, at least present an opportunity for us to refamiliarize ourselves with, okay, underneath coach, who is, Barry underneath all of that? Because that is sort of, if we want to use some loose language, like that is sort of a mask or that's sort of the shield or this sort of role that we played. But underneath that, Barry was still sort of, persisting. And I think that whether it's a career shift or a relationship or even a new kid, these life sort of events present these opportunities for us as men to sort of reacquaint ourselves, remember oftentimes it seems, or even for the first time figure out, who that guy really is.
It's always like the question is, well, when you pass at your funeral, what would they say about you? And so you tell your players that, or you say, hey, what do you want people to remember about you when you played here or when you were in this situation? So I would like to think people would say, driven, had goals. He was a someone competitive, but he also was, once you got to know him, he was easy to talk to. He would do anything for you. One of the things I try to do with every single text message of people that I have relationships with is call me if you ever need anything. And I mean that. If you need anything, call me and I'll do what I can to help you. And if I can't help you, I'll try to find someone who can. So I think that's one of the traits is trying to help others become better at what they do. And I want people to think of me that way, whether I was coaching or not, that I was easy to talk to. And hopefully I'm somebody too that would listen to you. And I think that's one of the things I'm working on too. That's a little muckish thing is there being a better listener.
What have you learned about, I think about the sort of a coming of age. And I think that that sort of is restricted sometimes, or people only think that people are doing that when they're younger, right? But I
Right.
also think that, there's the old adage of, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And by all means, you're not old. You've got plenty of youth left in you. But it's the idea of someone who has done something for so long, the idea of reinventing themselves seems, like it seems impossible. You can't do it when I'm constantly looking for the guys who are sometimes they're forced to do it, but they sort of take that challenge head on and do reinvent themselves. I think there's the classic example of like, someone like a Tom Brady, right, who was world class in one area and has all these personal and professional challenges and still finds a way to sort of reinvent himself and become, I don't know if he's the best at in his new sort of career, but at least he's sort of taken what made him great in one arena and found a way to apply it to another. And I see that not everybody makes that leap. A lot of people get stuck in their old identity and aren't really able to transition to whatever the next phase of life is.
Well, that's one of the great things about athletics. And I think it's important that they have athletics in college and have athletics in high school because you learn teamwork. You learn how to sacrifice. You learn how to, there's discipline. You have to, there's structure. There's failure and success. I mean, depends. There's a lot of things about that are aligned and parallel just life in general. And being in it for so long, I've got a really good understanding of failing because I have failed and I've won. But at the end of the day, what do people think about you? Were you somebody that they looked up to? Did I set the example? Am I doing it now? I'm trying to do a lot of the same things as a coach when I was coaching, now as a speaker, wrote the book and just, being around other leaders. So a lot of those principles that I learned and that I exhibited on a day to day basis. And then going back to the young me and the older me, I mean, the last 10 years, I wish I could take those 10 years and move them back another 10 or 15 or 20, because I'm more patient now, see things differently. I'm not quick to judge. I mean, all of the things that we want to be, the experience now, the being older and seeing things, not getting upset so fast and just being a lot more calmer, a lot more steady. And so I talk to myself a lot. I do a self talk a lot about those types of things. And I think it'll help me transition to the next job or next chapter of what I'm trying to do or what I'm going to do.
Yeah, I think one of the great things about sort of these evolutions, if you will, is that you don't necessarily start from scratch. You sort of take at least the skills or the experiences that you've gained and bring those into the next sort of arena. And I think that that's important for men to sort of get clear on. I remember thinking like having these moments when my relationship was falling apart and trying to hold it together as a dad and keep the business running. It's like, what worth do I have? It was literally like the sort of the questions that I was wrestling with. And I think it's important for guys to sort of remind them that those experiences, that the way in which we handle adversity is something that we can carry forward. And so even if it's just our response to challenges, that is something worth efforting for. I can imagine that being really hard for guys when they're making a big transition in life and changing, sort of their identity of who they thought they would be into something that, 'cause a lot of times they hadn't even considered, right? I remember for the first time for me, it was like having a kid. I thought that I would want to be a dad, but I'd never like seen or like put on that identity. I never sort of wore that identity. And to now sort of live in that, I think is a totally different experience for guys.
I mean, it's a day to day, it's a work in progress. It's trying to be good at what I want to do, just trying to be the best I can do, make the connections, talk to people. That keeps me motivated, keeps me fueled, keeps me focused. So there is some motivation there. And that's kind of how I've done things my whole life, though.
One of the unique things about being a coach I didn't spend a whole lot of time coaching at all. Actually, I played years and years of sports and had dozens of coaches, but I always sort of not studied, observed the good ones, I studied some of the great coaches like the John Woodens and stuff like that. But what I realized is that it was a great playground to learn, whether it's parenting skills or whether it's being a business. I mean, there's so many opportunities where we are called to be a leader. And I would imagine that some of those skills, some of those mindsets have helped in your ability to be a father or to parent, to be a husband, all those sorts of things. What sort of skills or habits do you find yourself carrying into your, daily personal life that you sort of honed and developed on the field?
Well, I would say the one thing is I have three values that I try to live by. One of them is self discipline. So if I tell you I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. Like if I don't feel like working out, I'm going to work out. If I don't feel like going out and doing yard work, or I don't feel like going to this event, I can still go. It's the discipline, getting up on time, telling yourself, hey, I'm going to be up in the morning and I'm going to do it. And I do it. I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do, even if I don't feel like doing it. So the commitment is greater than the feelings. The second one is I want to be excellent at everything I do. So every single thing that I work at, I want it to be not perfect, but I want it to be excellent. So when I got down here for the podcast, the recording here, I want to make sure the microphone's right. I want to make sure everything is exactly the way it should be. And everything that I do, I want to do it at the highest level. And that's something consistently that I want to continue to do on a day-to-day basis. And the third value is just personal fulfillment. I want to be happy at what I'm doing. And I think that's important because I think some of the challenges back as a young person, I wasn't as happy doing some of the things. I wasn't as happy as I probably should have been. So I want to do things that fulfill the things that I enjoy doing. But the big one there is excellence, trying to be the best at, and understanding that I can't be perfect. I get that. But the process of trying to be really, really good at something, I mean, really at a high level and everything. I would say that if I'm making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, I want to make the perfect peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I want it to be just, like I want it to be good. I want it to be excellent. So excellence in everything. So I think that would be the theme.
Yeah, I love that you say excellence and you contrast it against perfection because growing up, I wouldn't do things unless I was good at them, and it prevented me from trying out things, experimenting, testing things, and also, kept me at a beginner level at a lot of things that if I would have just acknowledged the need for effort or acknowledged the need to put in the time, then I could have excelled at things, much sooner or earlier. And I think that the thing that was in my mind holding me back was I wanted it to be perfect. And if it wasn't going to be perfect, then I didn't want to do it because then it would eat at my own identity. And I would, I am somehow less than because, I can't create this thing that's, perfection or whatever. When, to your point, we're not going to be perfect, but we can be excellent. And, I grew up a Raiders fan, which is sort of a tough things these days. But the motto of Al Davis, the famous owner, is, commitment to excellence. That sort of stuck with me. And I love that he chose excellence as the word, because to your point, it is just the best that it can be. And that is always something I think that's worth striving for. And also something that as I'm being honest and reflecting, I'm like, there's so many areas where I am cutting corners or I'm not being excellent at because it's tiring or it's
Right.
annoying or insert whatever. But go to your first point. If you bring in the self-discipline part, excellence becomes a lot easier or more accessible.
I mean, you go grocery shopping. How many grocery carts are all scattered all over the parking lot? All you have to do is walk an extra 40, 30, 20 feet to take it back where it's supposed to be. I don't get it. That's just lazy. Or people will, they'll wait to park, you know, 15 feet closer to the building at the supermarket or the department store or whatever it is, instead of just park and walk. I mean, so again, it's a mindset. And if you don't, it takes just as long to do it right as it is to do it wrong. So just do it right the first time. So that's kind of one of the quotes I heard years ago, and I try to live by that. So in everything, if I'm filling up my bag here, I got a bag. I could throw it in there, but throw it in there, organize it, zip it up. It took me an extra 15 seconds to do it right. instead of just laying it in there because I'm going to have to go back and fix it again. So I think that's one of the mindsets I have when I do things. And my wife is like that. So she is a good influence when it comes to those things too. She does things right. So I tend to try to follow along with her too.
I think it's a habit, right?
Yes.
Because I see my son and, he's got his backpack and he's 7, he's in second grade. So it's like, I remember what I was like in second grade. I did the same thing and I just shoved stuff in my backpack and like, not zip it up. And I'm like, hey, like take the time to do it. And of course, there's no blame. And I wish that someone would have instilled that habit in me earlier because where I am and where I could have been, is light years apart. And like you said, it's a difference of 15 seconds at a time.
Yes.
It
I
really
mean,
comes down to that much.
and again, it's a habit. It becomes a habit, and you don't veer off the path very often. And you do it in every little thing, and it just makes you a better person, more productive. And the world seems to be right when you're doing those things. To me,
Yeah, and I think it goes back to, what started this conversation. And I think what so much of this show has become about, which is sort of identity, that if you can act in alignment and you see yourself as a guy who takes the time, who is prepared, who, you know, for me, I recently saw that some people, they can never leave dishes in their sink. Like that's their form of excellence. And like for me, being like a single dad, I'm like, there are many nights where our dishes are, where the sink is far from that. And I'm like, is that an area where I'm sort of lacking excellence? Or can I work towards excellence in that area? And so over the last
right?
few days, like small things like that, I think can really make a big difference because it's the shifting in identity. Like this is the way, this is how we do things. This is how I do things, regardless of circumstances or feelings or emotions. And that's been an ongoing challenge for me. One of the things that I'm curious about, you mentioned having, coaching young men for, I mean, almost a half decade now, right? Almost, oh, you said over since the 80s, over 40 years.
I played. So I coached nearly 40 years, 38
So
years, 38 years.
what I think is incredible about that is definitely the longevity and the consistency, and also you probably saw, you had a great cross section or sample size, if you will, a data set of young men, sort of growing up. And I'm curious, my question is, over that time, are there things that you saw that sort of stayed the same between young men, in the 80s and 90s that were coming up, and then young men that were, in the 2010s and 2020s? And is there anything that's different between those groups?
That's a good question. Well, there's obviously outliers on both ends. There's extremes. There's the kid who does everything right. I mean, he's there. I have many of them. And he's there every day. He works hard. He does things on his own. He does extra work. He's great in the classroom. He's very respectful to his parents. He's respectful to me. He's a great teammate. And then there's the absolute opposite of that. But the majority of it, I think people, they want organization. They want it to be organized. They want you to care about them. They want you to care about what we're doing. And I think they want you to be discipline them. And that's not a bad word, I guess, but like stay on top of them, but be fair. And I think that's been consistent through all my 38 years. They want structure. They want to be coached. They want to be led fairly. And they want you to care about care about them and care about the program and care. And you do that by exhibiting certain things and acts, and you talk to them, you listen to them, that type of thing. The thing that's the big difference, kids kids are more singular. Like they play baseball and that's what they do. They don't do anything else really. That's all they do. Travel ball, parents, they want a scholarship. And go back to 1990. I mean, kids played every 3 sports. They didn't play on the 8U travel team when they were 8 years old. They put the glove down in the summer and picked up the football and put the football down, picked up the basketball or hockey puck or whatever they wanted to do. And then the other thing is, I think just overall, they're just not as tough. They spend a lot of time on the computer. They spend a lot of time playing video games. When I first started coaching, there were no cell phones. There was no Microsoft. I mean, you had to play, you had to go out. And it took a while for that to transition, but kids were tougher, a little tougher, a little more resilient, able to handle hard coaching. I can't coach like I used to. Not that I want to, but I can't. It's just not going to be effective. Now, it was a little more effective in 1992, 93 when you have that authoritative style. That's one of the big differences is I wouldn't call them soft because there's a lot of tough kids out there, but you handle them different now. Think about parents today. When did they grow up? I grew up in the 70s. I mean, we were outside. I mean, we're drinking water out of a hose. You know what I mean? Mom said, listen, I'll see you tonight. And I'd get on my bike and ride all over town. And they didn't care. And not that they didn't care, but they didn't worry.
Right.
And you can't do that today. It's not their fault. It's just the way they're brought up. I'm from the old school in the sense that I didn't have a lot growing up. Not that it wasn't poor. We just didn't, there was no, what video game did we play in 1970? The Atari, with the ping pong thing back and forth, whatever. I mean, just different in that sense. That's a long
Yeah.
answer to a question. I probably could have made it a lot shorter. I apologize.
No, it was some great insights in it. It reminds me of, I have a 7-year-old and he found the Nintendo, and it's the first time that he had like a tablet before, but it was the first time that I saw him sort of go down this binge rabbit hole where he like it was all consuming him. And again, I remember those moments as well. But it made me he's going through this game and he's like dealing with frustrations, and I'm trying to make it sort of a learning experience, right? Where, oh, you're dealing with challenge, and oh, it's frustrating. And also it is the least physically demanding, like the least like actually strenuous thing he's doing. And I think back to, I wasn't 7, but I think back to times where I had coaches and they were running us, and we were a little bit older than 7, but like I was puking. That was when we would stop, is when the first guy would puke. And so, and I think back to those times, and there's been moments in my life where I was like, if I can get through that, I can get through this. It builds up a level of resiliency that I don't know how else to build that. Like I don't know that that's necessarily the best way to do it. And without experiences, informative experiences that really challenge someone mentally is great. But I think there's something about putting an individual in a physical level of stress that is formative. And so the kids today are sort of missing out in a way. Maybe in the short term, they're gaining, but in the long term, I can't imagine them being as resilient in the typical fashion as someone who's gone through other
Right.
experiences.
And you have to intentionally and deliberately set up your day and set up the way you handle him or her, so they don't, well, so and so, my friend, his parents do this for him. Well, you're not him. Okay. One of the things I would say, if your kid's playing a sport, make him carry his bags. Make him carry his bags. I see kids coming and mom's carrying everything, the dad's carrying everything. Make him carry 'em, Another thing that always bothered me is that we'd be playing in the game and then the parents would come around and give them a sandwich or give them something to eat, like pack it in the morning, put it in your bag. Your parents giving you Gatorades. Just to me, I mean, I want you to fend for yourself. I want you to do things yourself and we'll help you. I want to make it tough for you. I don't know if my parents did that for me at all. I am probably a little insecure in a lot of ways because like you said earlier, if I wasn't good at something, I wouldn't do it. I'm still kind of that way. And it's not right. I wish I wouldn't feel that way. Like there's certain things I know I'm not good at, so I just avoid going or avoid doing it. And I think that comes from not trying a lot of things, not feeling good, like it's school. Like when you're in school and the teacher asks a question and you don't know the answer and she calls on you and then you give an answer and it's wrong and everybody laughs. Well, you just shut down from that point, right? It's not safe. And I think you want to create an environment. I mean, as a parent, I would want to create an environment for the kid that he has challenges and we're going to make it difficult, but we're not going to punish him, but we're going to make him do certain things. And it's hard. We have a little nephew, he's 2.5. And my wife, he was like, can I have my water? She's like, no, come over and get it yourself. I know that's a simple thing, but You take that and compound it over years, it adds up to something where you're not going to want to do something. You're going to expect somebody to do it for you and they're not going to do it. And then you're going to be behind. And here we go.
Yeah, I was talking with a mom recently, and she was kind of commiserating about this other kid and how the other kid was acting, and it was just totally out of control, rude, mean, bully, just. And I was thinking like, oh, that kid's parents must be assholes, like they're probably just jerks, checked out, that sort of thing. And what was interesting is that it was actually sort of the opposite. It was the mom that was coddling, the mom that was, the kid could do no wrong. It was sort of this, is very emblematic of this gentle parenting sort of philosophy. And the interesting thing is that made the kid an asshole too. So like on the polls, if the parents are assholes or if they're totally, have no backbone, the kid still ends up being a little, a
Right.
little shit. And so I guess I asked about the kids previously over the years. What have you seen from the parents and the way that they've evolved over those years, and maybe even, how that's tends to impact or affect the kids?
In college, we recruit players. I mean, we meet with the parents and the kids. So we get a real good chance to get a feel for what, I'm getting myself into if we like the kid. Now, we don't ever bring anybody on campus that we didn't think could play for us. So we've had long and short, we've had people come on campus that weren't good enough, and it's just a tough day because you're not going to recruit them. They come on their own. But if the parents that I've had, when I get to this meeting, and I got a picture now, it's me, and then there's across from there's the player, and the parents are standing, sitting around. And if the parents do all of the talking, that's a red flag. I want the kid, their son, to be talking to me. And I don't want him to look at his dad or mom for the answer. That's a red flag if you have that. I'm going to be as honest and as authentic in every aspect. I'm telling you exactly what we're going to do, exactly how we're going to run it, and this is what our expectations are. And I had a parent one time ask me, "What do you do about the parents?" I said, "Well, I really don't deal with the parents on the baseball side. I mean, we'll do if you're struggling in school or if there's a discipline, there's an issue where you've, broke a rule or whatever." The dad goes, "Good." I never heard from that father for 4 years. He may have said 15 words to me. He may have said more, but there was never a confrontation. He just let the kid play. My best teams had the best parents. They let them play. They let me coach. And for the most part, we brought in pretty good people. And I cared about it. So I didn't have as many problems. I did have a problem with a few when I was younger that I would have been able to handle at 55 years old that I didn't do a very good job at 35.
Are there other either habits, beliefs, like ways of thinking that made that relationship for everybody or that whole experience go better for everyone?
Well, I think they trusted me for the better part of the 4 years that they were there, 3 years. I think the way the kid is brought up, the way he's been from a little kid, from his formative years all the way through, the discipline that they show, there's nobody the same. It's everybody's a little different because I've had kids strike out and be walking back in the dugout and look up in the stands at their dad because, his swing wasn't good or his dad's telling him something about where his hand. So there was that. And the kid never, ever got to be as good as he could have been because there's a circle. We have a team and there's a circle. And when you start getting inside that circle, parents, your buddies, then it's negative about the team, about the coach, about the playing time. That's just going to break the team down. So we would make a point, we'd draw a big circle on the board and say, okay, look, these are all the factors on the outside. Your parents, the media a little bit, not much, but now with social media, yes. Your buddies, all these people on the outside. You need to keep them outside. You just need to keep them away because that's a negative. The best parents stayed out, from what I could tell, stayed out of my way. And if there was an issue with black playing time, I told the young man, do not have your parents call me. Do not. You deal with me, and then we'll talk about it. And we had a lot of conversations over the years because everybody thinks they should be playing more. That's the challenge of a coach, and it's a tough part, especially at the levels that I coached at, where the parents were involved with fundraising. I can tell you right now, there's no parent talking to a Power Four athlete's coach. There's nobody at Ole Miss calling Lane Kiffin to be mad at him because he's going to LSU. I
Right.
guarantee you that. Nobody ever said anything to Mike Krzyzewski. No parent ever said anything to him. But at my level, we had interaction because we needed the parents to help raise money, because we needed that. So, so I try to keep my distance, but the best parents were the ones that I thought they raised their kids to be respectful, hardworking, and I enjoyed coaching those kids and that had those parents. And at the end of the 4 years, I would make sure the parents knew what I thought of their young man.
One of the things, and I think they did it in great and full intention, their intentions were great. But my parents were very much, you've got to play sports. I think my dad, basically was living vicariously through my little leagues and sports. And, he never got to, I was told often, he never got to do any of these things. So it was sort of my duty to be the MVP of the
Right.
team. And I think that as much value and as much as the pushing sort of, there was a benefit there. At the highest levels, I don't think that I was driven, self-driven to excel because part of it didn't feel like it was for me necessarily. And it took me, getting older and sort of maturing to realize what sort of things I really wanted to pursue in life. And I would imagine that there's probably less of that today with parents, but I still see it. I still see it sometimes where they're sort of trying to live through their kids. And I can't imagine that ending up well. And
No, it doesn't. It can't. I'll tell you this story. I quit playing high school football after my sophomore year, and my dad was really upset, but he never told me that. My mom did. She said, and then she told me years later, she said, he was really upset that you didn't go back out and play. Now, I played baseball, so that's what I wanted to focus on, but he never pushed me. Never. Nope. No, never. As a matter of fact, my first tryout for Little League, I told him I didn't want to try out, but he knew I wanted to play. So we drove to the Little League field. And I had my glove, and I'm 7 or 8. I'm 8 years old, and I'm sitting in the truck. Now the kids are out playing, and he didn't say anything. He didn't say, you got to go. You make me go. He just drove me there. And I can see it right now. It's a cloudy day. After about, I don't know how many minutes, 5, maybe 10, I could see him out there playing. I wanted to play. I want to try out. So I tried out, but he never pushed me. He never did. And if he was upset, he never showed it. And I think that's important. Because I think, say, okay, well, what do you want to do? What do you want to be really, really, really good at? Like really good at. And whatever that is, okay, let's do it. If you're not sure, okay, try a lot of things. You'll know. But I'll tell you this, I knew I wanted to coach when I was in college. Once I decided I wanted to be a Division I college head baseball coach, every single decision I made from that point forward was geared to put me on that path to do it. There was other things going on, but in terms of what my goals were, I knew what I wanted to do and I didn't waver. So that was one of the things I think helped me. I made my mind up. Nobody else did. My parents didn't. They supported it and were happy for me. And I guess, but it didn't matter what they thought. I was going to do that. That's what I wanted to do. And I did.
well, and you did it for 38 years. So congratulations on that. And you have this new journey. And what was the purpose for writing the book? And why did you choose to write the sort of book that you'd end up writing?
Well, initially, I knew I was going to get out of coaching and I wanted to be a speaker. I wanted to be someone that could get up in front of groups and help them and tell them about how to be excellent, how to be great, how to transform their program, how to transform their team, their organization, whatever it is. So before this, just going back a few years, I started working on my PhD. So that was all geared towards learning what it took to transform teams on the research level, deeper, not just what we read on the newspaper or watch on ESPN, like really, really dig into what it is to be excellent. So that started the thinking to build this knowledge base of transformation and sustainability. And then to be able to do that, they said, well, you got to write a book. I'm like, okay. Somebody said, put your ass in the seat and start typing. I started, and long and short, I wrote an outline and I came up with a story. And I thought that was the easiest way for me to get the point across through a story, an athletic story that I lived for 38 years. So it was easy. Well, I say easy, but it was comfortable for me to outline this season, which is a story about a women's basketball program, a struggling women's basketball program, and the season that they have and all of the things that come along the path, the challenges, the failures, the good days, the bad days, the wins, the losses, the hard practices, the bad practices, the injuries, all that. So I've already experienced, I say already, I had 35, 38 years of that. And then punch in the emotional aspect for me. And I feel like emotional intelligence is the tipping point. Darren Blood is the coach's name, is a hard-nosed, highly tempered, volatile coach who fails and is get blackballed, and he's saved by his friend who is the president of a university, and he says, look, you can coach, but we've got to work on those emotional skills. We've got to get you better at having better people skills, controlling your emotions, being interested in other people, not just yourself, providing an environment where people can succeed in. So that's the story. And that's essentially my story as a coach. At the end of my career, I was controlling my emotions much better. I was more interested in the people. I was always interested, but this was intentional. I made it an intentionality. I was intentional and deliberate to do it. And then I tried to create a practice or a classroom or wherever we were, where kids, the players, the people could talk and freely speak in front of everyone and give their opinions without being criticized. And just made it fun, because I don't think I did that in 1995, and I didn't do it in 2005. I wasn't as interested in people. I didn't provide a safe environment, and I certainly didn't control my emotions. So those are the three things, and that this coach through this story is learning, and he's being mentored by a boss that everyone would want to work for.
And where book's out now, if I'm not mistaken, where can people go and where's the best place to follow up with you and find all that info?
The best place is to go to Amazon. And the title of the book is Old Dog, New Tricks, The Power of Leading with Emotional Intelligence. You could type in Barry Davis and it should pop up, and you can get it for $14.99. The Kindle is $9.99. And I'm actually going to have an audio book coming out soon. And then you can go to my website, and you can also, get more information on me and working with me. You can get on my email list, which is drbarrydavis.com. You get a weekly email that's leadership, team building, culture, coaching, emotional intelligence, something different every week that you can take with you and make you a little better.